Okay, well, welcome to this video. This is going to take you through what the problem solving paper looks like, or paper 2 looks like. As you'll see, just have a quick look, it's an hour and a half long and it's made up of 3 parts. The first part is 32 marks, the second part is 28 and the final part is worth 12 and 4 marks for SPAG. So actually, as you go through the parts, the number of marks become least, but the questions get longer. So it's worth just bearing that in mind. Now, if we just scroll down a little bit, we'll just get to this point. It's worth noting that you do need a calculator and ruler. I know some of you didn't turn up with a calculator for the last paper. You will need one for this one. And you also need to make sure you've got black pens, and yeah, you should be absolutely fine. That should be the only equipment you really need. Right, let's just move down and have a look at this. So this is quite interesting. So this again will give you an introduction, so it's on the inside page. This will give you an introduction to what it's about. So it starts off by saying Battery State is located in Nigeria, so it gives you some location information, and it tells you the environment here suffers desertification. So this exam paper is going to be about this one issue and how to solve it. As we said before, you look at the marks are here, but what you'll see is that the paper tends to follow a standard pattern. Part A will be looking at background information about the state. It will look at the climate, the causes, basically what the problem is. Part B is looking at the options. In this case, there's 3 options for solving desertification. And part C is where you have to write down your final decision. What it is you're going to do, why you're picking that one, and why you've rejected the other options. It's also worth noting that each part gives you a amount of time. So if you look here, part A is 30 minutes. Part B is actually 35 minutes, even though it's only worth 28 marks. And part C is 25 minutes, again, even though it's only worth 16 marks. And that reflects the fact that the questions get harder as you go through. What we'll do is we'll talk through each of the different questions. What you might want to do is have a go at this exam paper if you haven't had a go already. It can be found on the Padlet, it's under the SAMs, and you'll need to find the relevant pages as the second unit in. So let's just look down here and let's just start off. So some nice easy questions to start with, the basic map work questions. So name the continent in which Nigeria is located, that's obviously Africa. Look at where it is. Actually, you'll need to look at the map at that, and then 2 statements about location. So if we have a quick look at the map. Okay, so we can see the map here. First thing we can see is that it's in Africa. We can also see that it's in northwest Nigeria. And then it's basically asking us to have a look here and to say where Battery State is. So looking at this, you might say it's east or southeast of Kano State, south of Jiwaga State. You might say it's located on the Misu River and the Jamir River. Anything like that would be absolutely fine. So those sorts of questions are typical sort of starting questions. They're there to get you comfortable. Testing some basic skills should be fairly accessible. If we just scroll down, we then get to this. So this is a climate graph. Wherever you see a graph, particularly when they've printed it on the exam paper, you will have a resource booklet here, it's worth noting that that means that there's some data to fill in, and again 37 degrees would be about there, and you draw it in. So that should be fairly straightforward. It's a typical hot desert, semi-arid climate. So it's got if you have a look, it's hot all year round, doesn't have much of a temperature range. What's that? Probably about 8 or 9 degrees, and tends to have 1 wet season and 1 long dry season. So actually that's pretty typical. You've seen lots of things like that when you've been looking at the savannah, for example. And so the next question shouldn't be too hard. So it asks you to complete some information, what the highest temperature is, lowest temperature, the highest monthly precipitation, what the temperature range is, and where the dry season is. And then it asks you to contrast, you've got to say what's different with the UK, identify 4 differences. Well, basically, if you have a look here, they've almost given you it here. So, in the UK, for example, you would expect 100 or 200 millimetres of rain at most. Obviously, the highest monthly precipitation for this place is let me just go back up to it. Oops. Highest monthly precipitation here is more than that, it's 250. So the wettest part is actually wetter. I might talk about temperatures. Maximum temperatures in the UK often reach about 20 degrees. This is hot all year round. We have 4 distinct seasons, they have 2 distinct seasons. The temperature range here is much smaller, it's 7 or 8 degrees. The UK temperature range is about 18 to 20 degrees. So that would be the sort of question they're asking you there to do, and normally they would expect you to contrast it with the UK. Right, it then goes on to desertification is a problem, and then nice simple sort of tick box. And what's the correct meaning of desertification? Well, process of elimination. Desert becomes more fertile? No. Fertile land becomes even more fertile? No. The process in which fertile land turns into desert. I'd actually say that's wrong, but it's the best of the 3 options. It's normally the degrading of land. It doesn't have to physically turn into desert to be desertification, but the nice thing about that is the other 2 are clearly wrong. Right, then you've got a little bit here on climate change. So basically use these words to fill that in. Fossil fuels such as, I imagine, coal would be there somewhere. Oil, sorry. Are burnt in power stations. This adds carbon dioxide, greenhouses to the atmosphere, trap heat from the sun, known as the greenhouse effect, and so on. So again, it should be fairly straightforward for you. This section A isn't about trying to trick you particularly. Okay, then you've got a diagram here showing some parts of the water cycle, and it shows you why trees being cut down, deforestation is the issue. So where's interception? Well, interception will be here where the tree catches it. Infiltration is going to be where the water soaks into the soil, and I'm not quite sure why. They've got C, which looks like it's the water being taken up by the roots. Clearly they haven't got that one. Then you've got why does deforestation damage the soil? And again, the clues are here basically. Okay, they won't put labels on unless they're useful. So actually, the tips here is to look at the labels they've added on there. So first of all, shade. If you cut down trees, you don't have shade, therefore the soil will dry out. Secondly, if you've got leaves and interception, that will stop the rain falling on the ground so quickly and as intensely, and that will reduce surface runoff and soil erosion. And finally, the roots are going to bind the soil together, so again it reduces soil erosion. So again, the clue here, if you look at the diagram, the examiner's trying to help you, believe it or not. Okay. So then we get on to this one. So study diagram on page 3, we're going to have a look at that in a second, of the separate resource folder. It shows some activities that can lead to desertification. Choose 2 of these activities, explain each activity may lead to desertification. So the clue here is a 4-mark question. So you're going to need to have the activity, there'll be no mark for that. So you're going to have to basically write one reason and explain it. And that will get you the 4 marks. So let's have a look at page 3. Okay, so this is the diagram we wanted us to have a look at, and what you can see, the nice thing is that it's actually giving us 5 possible answers. What you need to do for each one is explain why it's bad and what the knock-on effect of that is. So it's sort of one so what, if you like. Well, let's start with overgrazing. Overgrazing means that the grass is removed, and bare soil is exposed, there's no roots in the grass, and that's going to increase soil erosion. Overcropping basically means growing too many crops on it. What will happen is that those crops will basically remove too many nutrients. The soil therefore becomes basically starved of nutrients, and few things can grow. That's effectively the same as lack of fertilising. So basically there's no fertiliser, which means that there's no nutrients to replace the crops. The nutrients that the crops take, the soil therefore becomes nutrient poor, fewer things grow. Not allowing the land to rest, again very similar. In traditional, what's sometimes called shifting agriculture, what you would do is you'd actually allow the soil every 2 or 3 years to actually have a year's fallow. That allows nutrients to come back into the soil. If you don't allow the soil to rest, then you don't give the soil time to recuperate. That means then it will basically become starved of nutrients. And finally, land clearance using fire, actually in the short term is quite good because the wood and the things act as nutrients, but then you have got no root systems, you've got no vegetation. What that actually means is that, again, there's no shade, there's no interception, there's no roots behind the soil, so you get a massive increase in erosion. Any of those would do. Just simply pick the two that you feel most comfortable about. Be slightly careful about picking very similar ones, so for example those two, because the danger is you might end up repeating the same thing and not getting a mark for it. Okay, so just moving down to the next question, we've got some socioeconomic data here. We can see we've got the state and we've got the whole of Nigeria, remember that's the country, and basically identify the patterns shown in the data in table 3. Well, what does that mean? Well, basically, in simple terms, 62 versus 46, well, 62 is higher, 65, 51, 54, 41. In each case, battery state's data is worse than that for Nigeria. It has higher numbers of illiterate population, more people drinking unsafe drinking water, more people suffering from food poverty. With this answer, I'd basically say it's got higher numbers for all three categories, and I might even use some numbers in there just to be absolutely sure. So that's nice and easy, but you get a feel that this is not a particularly wealthy part. Okay, and then we get to this part. Suggest how desertification may make the lives of people who are living in battery state even more challenging. Use information from table 3. We'll come back to table 3. We've got food poverty, drinking water, illiteracy. Okay, well, food is nice and easy. Desertification means that food production will decrease. With decreasing food production, then hunger and food insecurity and food poverty is going to increase. That's certainly got me 2 marks. But actually, to get the 3rd mark, I probably want to talk about something else as well. So I might pick the illiteracy. And again, if people are not able to earn money from farming, they can't afford to send their kids to school, therefore the illiteracy rate is going to increase. I could also, if I want to take up the water, so again, with increase in desertification, less water stored in the soil, more surface runoff, actually there may well be less supplies of water as well. We also know that with desertification comes the removal of trees, and trees transpire water, so there'd be less rain as well, but that's probably taking it a bit far for a 3-mark question. So that's the end of part A. You can see it's really just about the problems. They're fairly simple questions, got a lot of sort of interpreting data type things, getting you to know. You're not meant to be an expert at this place. They'll try and pick something you haven't actually studied before, because what I want to try and do is create a level playing field. So that should have taken about half an hour to get here. So now we're going to go on to section B. And if we scroll down, what we'll see, section B is starting to look at solutions, and it's going to take you 35 minutes. So about 10 or 12 minutes on each of the solutions, I suspect. Okay, so let's have a look at the first solution. So it says, study the map and information on page 4. Give the length of and the mean width of the Great Green Wall. Explain why planting trees and shrubs may help prevent desertification. And desertification is an international problem. Explain why it might be difficult for the Great Green Wall to solve the problem in this region of Africa. Use information from resource folder. Well, let's stop here and I'm going to have a look at page 4 and see what information we can find, and then we'll come back. Okay, so this is the map it's referring to. Right, let's have a look and see what we can look at. So we've got a key. We can see hot desert is to the north. We've got semi-desert, which seems to be bordering to the north of the Green Wall. We've got the savannah to the south, and we've got the rainforest down here, and then we've got the Great Green Wall. That's here. We've also got a scale bar, and some of the questions were, well, what's the distance between X and Y? That's a question of using a ruler and measuring it. On the actual exam, it would probably be a sensible scale, like 2 centimetres per 1,000 kilometres. In fact, if you do that, it's approximately 5,000 or so kilometres across. It says the mean width, so what I would do is measure a couple of them, and again it comes to about 250. So we've got that. The next question is, how's it going to work? Well, if we just have a look at what we're actually looking at, a nice little photo of it down here, you can see some trees and presumably that's people next to them. Well, how are trees going to help? Trees are going to act as a physical barrier. It's going to stop that desert from spreading, so it stop the sand from encroaching. They provide shade, which means that they stop the soil from drying out. The roots will obviously bind the soil together, so that will reduce soil erosion. The leaves will intercept the rain, again will reduce soil erosion. The trees will actually transpire, so that will make the climate wetter. So there's lots of ways in which this is going to work. The final question was asking why is an international project like this quite difficult. In fact, we'll go back to the actual question. Okay, so this was the question here. So it's a 2-mark question. Again, what it needs is one reason and explanation. Very important you don't just lift what's there, because if you do, you won't get any marks at all. So explain why it might be difficult for the Great Green Wall to solve the problem. The region of Africa use information resource folder. Well, if you look at it, and this is quite important, it's information resource folder. So you've got to go back and use that map. So what do we know from the map? Well, we know that it's 5,000 or so kilometres across. That's going to take a huge amount of coordination. These countries may not have the ability to use that, to actually coordinate like that. We also know that these are all African low-income countries, so they may not have the capital to actually be able to invest to actually do this. We also know that many of those countries are actually in the middle of civil war, so there may not be the stability, the peace to actually be able to plant them. So in each case, what I'm doing is I'm using information from the map and I'm explaining it. I'm not just looking at the information that they've got down there and just putting that down. You will not get any marks for copying anything from the exam. That's really important to remember. So that's the first of our 3 options. The second one is a dam. So let's have a look. It asked me to go and look at page 5, so let's go and do that now. Okay, and we can have a look here. We can see some information. It's got some good points. So you get hydroelectric power, that means you get electricity, allowing a large area to be irrigated, but it's going to flood many villages. There's also been a lot of water lost through evapotranspiration. We've got a nice little photo of it there. It doesn't look that impressive, but I suspect it's quite a big old project. And we've also got these 3 villages down here, and if we have a look at these, we can see that village A is behind the dam, so it's lost some of its farmland being flooded. Village B is down here, just in front of the dam or behind, and this has got a reliable supply of water, more crops, and it can grow cash crops. Cash crops, by the way, are crops that you sell as opposed to food crops, which are ones that you eat as a farmer. And finally, the poor souls down here, well, they're not getting much water because the dam's obviously got rid of a large amount, and actually it stopped flooding down here. So that means they're not getting water to grow crops like rice or silt for fertile soil. So we've unpicked the resource. Let's go back to the questions and have a look and see what they've got. Okay, so these are the questions. Let's go and start unpicking them. So, explain why building a dam will help reduce the local effects of desertification. That's not meaning it's going to stop desertification, it's going to reduce the effects of them. It's a 4-mark question. It doesn't say how many reasons, so really I'd be after 2 reasons. Now, there are no marks for lifting from the resource. So if I basically say more reliable water, there's no mark for that. So by all means lift things from the resource, but then you have to give 2 logical reasons. So, greater supply of water, no mark, because it's from the resource. However, what that means is you can grow more crops, 1 mark. More crops means you can sell more, therefore it reduces poverty, 2nd mark. I might pick out, for example, provides fish, which is an important source of protein, 1 mark, reduces food poverty or reduces the risk of hunger. I might pick out hydroelectric power, again no mark for that, but it provides homes with electricity, 1 mark, which means that people can study at night or improve the quality of their life, or it might even allow for factories to be set up. So 1 mark for the reason, 1 mark for the explanation, no mark for lifting from the resource. That's always important. Okay, the next one then asks us to have a look at the different villages, A, B, C. Remember, A was behind the dam, B was in front, C was down. Which village would benefit most from the dam and why? Probably village B. If you looked at village B, again, that was able to grow cash crops, which means they can sell them. Remember, no mark saying cash crops. Cash crops can be sold, reducing poverty. They benefited from being able to grow more crops, which meant that you're reducing food poverty. Therefore, people are healthier. Therefore, people can go to school more. That's the sort of information that they're after there. So, those questions, again, the important bit is just to remember there's no marks for actually copying what's already written down there. That's a really important golden rule. Now the next question asks you one reason, this is really important, it's a 3-mark question. One reason why large-scale water projects are controversial. You may even want to talk about a specific example you've studied, so you could look, for example, the Mekong River. And that's how I'd do that, basically. The dams on the Mekong River in China, or this dam in Nigeria, will reduce the flow of water downstream. Probably 1 mark for that. What this means is that farmers and countries downstream have less water. The river will no longer flood, so they will have less water and less fertile silt. And those countries, those people downstream, have very little control over it. So that would be the sort of thing I'd be trying to mention in this. Okay, so that is the second one done. We're on to the third and final one now. So, a proposal to fund a number of self-help projects for farmers. Study the photograph and information on page 6. It shows drip irrigation systems that have been funded by an NGO, charity in other words. A number of small schemes like this have been set up. And if we look at the questions first and then we'll go and look at the results. Why is drip irrigation being used? What are the long-term benefits of this project? Explain why there are disadvantages and rely on a number of small self-help projects to solve the problem of desertification. So let's go and have a look at the resources before we come back to those questions. Okay, so this is a nice photo showing basically how drip irrigation works. You put some water into a bucket, there is a pipe, the pipe runs along the crops, and in that pipe are little holes, and basically water dribbles out and it basically is picked up by the crops. So that's how it works. And then if we just go down, we'll also see we've got the disadvantages here. Now remember, there's no marks for just copying that down, but one of the questions was about it. So disadvantages would include it doesn't actually increase the amount of water available for irrigation. NGOs may withdraw their support, and not all farmers may be members of these projects. So that's the sort of limitations that we will need to refer to, but we'll need to explain them. Okay, so let's go back to the question. Okay, so let's look at the questions. So the first one is explain why drip irrigation is used in hot semi-arid climates, and it's 3 marks. So basically, remember, it's a pipe, you put water down, the water seeped out. So the key thing about this is you've got a limited amount of water and try to maximise the use. So by using drip irrigation, what you do is you reduce the amount of water you're using, you maximise the amount of water that is soaked up by the plant root systems and is focused on the plants, and as a consequence you're reducing the amount of evaporation. So it massively conserves the amount of water you're using and maximises the amount going to plants so you can grow more. So that's the first one. Let's have a look at the next question. Next question is, suggest long-term benefits of local farmers of this project. Well, quite clearly, if you are conserving water, what that means is you've got water, more water available for drinking, etc., less likely to have water shortages. You're increasing the reliability of your water, so you're less likely to run out. You're able to grow more crops because more water is going to the crops rather than evaporating. And if you're growing more crops, what that actually means is you're going to earn more money. You're going to have more cash crops. You can sell that cash crops. That can be invested in new farm equipment, new crops, maybe drought-resistant crops. It can be invested in education. It can be invested in local projects. It can create a positive multiplier effect, so the whole area gets richer. So there's lots of long-term benefits from this. Now, the final question is explain why there are disadvantages. Now, it'd be so easy just to write down the 3 reasons that they had. The important bit is that golden rule. There's no marks of copying what's on the paper. So, if you went back to the thing, you will see there are 3 reasons. So the first one was water for irrigation may not be available all year round. So basically, these small-scale projects are dependent on there being rain. They don't address the actual amount of water available, just the use of it. So that's a limitation. The other problem is that they're dependent on NGOs. NGOs can withdraw, and that means that people do not have either the knowledge or the technology or perhaps the money to actually run small-scale projects. Although obviously the best projects are actually proper bottom-up projects would actually allow for that. And the other problem is that they're small scale. Therefore, actually, it's not going to reach a large number of farmers. So the benefits will be concentrated in 1 or 2 places where the NGOs go. They won't be widespread. Remember, we're looking at a problem here, which is 5,000 miles across. So actually only benefit a minority of people, not a large number of people. So yes, by all means, write down the reasons from the resource, but actually the key bit is to explain them. That's where the marks are. Okay, so that's the end of part B, and we're finally on to part C now. Now, part C is where you have to make a decision. You're going to have to say which one's better than the other. The snag is we don't know what it's going to look like. We know that it will take about 25 minutes. We know the number of marks, but actually every single one of these part Cs is different. So it is really, really important that you read the advice. So if you have a look here, what you will see is it says this part asks you to advise the national government on the order of which the 3 options should be carried out. So just changing the colour of the pen. So the important bit here is you're looking at the order. So you have to say, this is my best, this is the best, this is the second best, this is the third best. You've got the 3 options here, so you must talk about all 3. And then underneath here, it says, write a letter to the government of Nigeria in which you advise on the order in which the 3 options should be carried out to reduce desertification. So that's your question. In your letter, you should rank the options, so that'll be your first opening paragraph, that you should do to carry it out. You need to justify your decision, and you need to take into account the social, the economic, and the environmental sustainability of the options. What that basically means then is you've got a very simple structure. Let's say, for argument's sake, you're going to go number 1, 2, 3, and you're going to use these 3 things here. And you're simply going to say that option 1 is the best, option 2 is the second best, option 3 is the best. So what you will do is you are going to open up with perhaps 1 sentence, 2 sentences, basically saying what the ranking is. And then you're going to write a paragraph about option 1. That paragraph is going to have 3 sections. You're going to start off by telling me the social. What are the social benefits? What makes that really good? How does it help large numbers of people? Then you're going to tell me the economic good, and you'll explain how economically it's sustainable. Remember, that's good in the short and the long term. And then finally, your third section is going to be looking at the environmental sustainability of the option. When you've done that, you then leave a space, new paragraph, option 2. You basically tell me why it's probably fairly good, perhaps socially or probably more economically. Why, on the other hand, it may not be so good socially, and why it might be bad environmentally. Your final section is talking through option 3 and your third option will probably be the worst one, so you're primarily going to be telling me why it's not so good. Why does it perhaps have limited effects socially, limited effects economically, limited effects sustainability? And that's how you do it. The problem is that you may get one with two options, or you might have four options, you have to pick two. You just simply have to read this. Now, what they will also do is they will also give you some space. And if you look down here, okay, there's a blank page. So I would also use this blank page here, and what I might be tempted to do is draw up a table, and it might be as simple as something like this. And I might have option 1, option 2, option 3, positives and negatives. I might spend 5 minutes doing this, but certainly no more. Okay, and I might just want to make sure that I've got my social, economic and environmental. I always remember that by its C. And simply I would just write in 2 points for each one, or 3 points, an economic, a social and environmental one. Doesn't matter if I've got 5 or 6 positives and a few negatives, that'll be the best one I pick, but I need to make sure that I've got social, economic and environmental. And then basically, that's it. I'll get down to writing, and the first thing to do is make sure that I've actually filled this in. And then, like we said earlier, 3 paragraphs, start off with the best one, explain why the best one is so good, but the really important bit is you make sure that you cover the social, economic and environmental sustainability of each options. So that's the exam paper in a nutshell. Let's just have a quick think about what might be the top tips. So I'm going to leave you with 6 top tips. Number 1, and probably the most important one, is that there are no marks for lifting information. Anything written in the resource book is never going to be worth a mark. That doesn't mean you don't use it, but you have to explain it and then use your so what chain, that chain of reasoning, to explain it further. Secondly, one thing many people miss out is whenever there's a graph question, like a line graph or a bar graph, and it's in the actual exam paper, that probably means you need to actually complete it. So look out for those. They're very easy to miss because you're trained to look for dotted lines to write on. Many questions might link back to a diagram. If they do, or a map, then look at the key, look at the labels. The key and the labels are there for a reason. They are clues as to how you might want to answer it. Particularly question C, or section C, read the question. The question for section C will be different every time, but it will tell you exactly what the examiner is looking for. So in the example we've just looked like, it said, tell me the rank order, make sure you cover economic, environmental and social sustainability. So you have to therefore look at all 3 of them, and you have to write a sentence or 2 about each one. If you do that, you'll do well. A lot of section B and C is about explaining, so really do need to make sure that you've fully explained each point. Use that so what chain. Okay, people can grow more crops, so what? That means they can earn more money, so what? That's going to reduce poverty, so what? That means they can send their kids to school, for example. It's that developed chain of reasoning. Particularly on 6 and 8 mark questions, or anything higher, there isn't point marking, so it's about the quality of explanation, to really go to town on that. And likewise, on those extended questions, try and make sure you're using good vocab. Sustainable or sustainability is a really important one, that good in the short, good in the long term. Poverty may well come out, and one that you can bring in a number of points is the multiplier effect. And that's quite nice because anything that creates jobs or encouraging development of industry will create a positive multiplier effect. This means the area gets richer, it means more money is being spent, and other shops, services in the local area can expand, creating more wealth. Likewise, anything which will actually reduce the amount of jobs or money in an area will create a negative multiplier effect. People will be poorer, they'll spend less, local shops and services will shut, making the area poorer. That's really nice because you can learn that one and you can include that in pretty much any development of an economic benefit or cost, and it's a real A-star sort of thing. So I hope that's been useful. By all means, feel free to email me. I'll be around lunchtime on Monday. If you have any questions, please come and find me. But if not, good luck, and I hope that's been helpful. Thanks so much.